So our special guest tonight is Marcus Ferrell. He is the former outreach director for Bernie Sanders' 2016 campaign. Let's go ahead and bring him in. What's going on, Marcus?
Hey, Sabrina, how you doing? Thank you for having me on your show, and thanks to all the viewers for watching your show. Your show is pretty dope.
And thank you so much for coming on. There's a lot that has been happening. Obviously, I know you've been paying attention to what's going on with the Democratic Party in particular. You were a part of the Bernie 2016 campaign. And a lot of times people talk about the 2020 campaign because I think it had more commercial attention. But the 2016 campaign, in my opinion, was still very successful. And we saw what happened there at the DNC at the convention where there were states that Bernie Sanders definitely won, and they handed them over to, of course, Hillary Clinton. So I think we all remember that. I want to hear about some of the experience that you had during that time. And is there anything that you look back on from the 2016 campaign that you feel maybe that 2020 campaign was missing?
I think both. First off, it was an amazing experience. I was Bernie's 5th, 6th, or 7th employee, right? And his headquarters was in Burlington, Vermont at that time. And it was the first time in my life where a white person walked up to me and said, "Let me touch your hair." So that's how that's how many white black folks were up there on that campaign. It was an amazing experience. I got there and pretty much made my own title, right? Because it was so unorganized when I got there in 2015 that I said, well, you know, the math ain't mathing. We're going to have to figure out what we're going to do with black people because I think they're important in Democratic primaries. So I had to argue foot and nail to actually create and try to establish a black outreach program for the Bernie Sanders 2016 campaign. And I mean, listen, it was a beautiful thing watching an old white guy from Burlington, Vermont, from Vermont, be able to run for president and get the momentum he had. When I started, we didn't have that kind of momentum. But I was there throughout the swing and the turn where Bernie Sanders became nationalized, recognized Bernie Sanders, right? So that was the positive, right? And being able to see people have something to believe in for the first time in my life, a massive amount of young people who are now in their 30s and going into their 40s. But back then, it was just a massive amount of movement folks that wanted to actually see a change. The things that I didn't like were it was very insulated, right? It was basically 4 white guys who made all the decisions, just like white men would make decisions when it comes down to they were really, really, really showing their uber Caucasian side when it comes down to decisions that were being made, right? One example is there was a Beautiful America commercial that everybody remembers where they had, I guess, Paul Simon or somebody singing this America song, and it was all of Iowa. And I said, hey guys, we need a commercial in South Carolina. And I said, and it better not be that commercial. And what they decided to do was take one white person out and put a black face in and run the same commercial. And I was like, we got enough money to get some Marvin Gaye around here or something. So, I mean, I think the problems was, of course, the black turnout, but there also was a lot that was going against Bernie. He had the Hillary Clinton machine was against him in South Carolina. You got to understand that at that time, the Clinton Foundation was buying churches new roofs and people had 20, 30 year history. And also there was a thing about not believing the Clinton campaign did an amazing job of making black folks think that it was impossible to pay for the things that Bernie was presenting. And it was a very establishment neoliberal bullshit trick to actually get black, to suppress the black folk and also and tie in the blackness of the first quote unquote black president of Bill Clinton. But yeah, it was a fun campaign. It's just, there wasn't really an openness at the top to do as much as we could possibly do to get the black vote, which was the most important vote in that primary.
Yeah, I saw some similarities with 2020. I was laughing about the Vermont comment because I live in Massachusetts and I go to Vermont at least once a year, usually during the summer, and so I totally know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I used to live in Roxbury, by the way.
Wow. Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Okay.
I managed the mayor's race in Boston a couple of years ago. I was in the primary where Marty Walsh ended up winning the whole thing. But yeah, I lived in Roxbury during that time period.
Interesting. Okay, so you're familiar with how politics is here. Very
Oh
well
yeah,
familiar. Yeah, so it's I totally understand that, and that was one of the concerns I had during the 2020 presidential campaign as well. I felt like Bernie should have really dived in a lot harder about his experience during like civil rights, marching with civil rights activists. I felt like he really should have dove like into that. But I guess his message was, let's just include everybody. And if we focus on one group, then that's going to make other people feel excluded. However, I will say from my experience talking to Black voters, I was able to convince my parents to vote for Bernie Sanders, but I was not able to convince other older Black voters to vote for him. They just were not convinced that he was really all in for the Black community. Him being from Vermont didn't help. That was another thing that I heard from people. Even though the policies that he was running on would greatly benefit Black Americans, there was also the issue of reparations that was brought up. And I know you wrote about that as well, that like why some of the Black voters were turned off from Bernie.
listen, it was a pivotal moment in 2016. So first off, let me be very clear. And I don't have beef with these guys anymore, but Jeff Weaver tried to blackball me because I was fighting so hard for Black issues and publicly saying things like I have no earthly idea why Bernie Sanders does not support reparations. There was a moment where he was headed to South Carolina, and I said, if the reparation question comes up, you either support reparations or you stay quiet. I like to point this out to people when it comes down to Bernie at that time period, because since then he has come out in favor of reparations, but there was a pivotal moment where he should have done it when people were paying attention, and he didn't. And I just want to point this out to people. Reparations right now is polling at the same place that Medicare for All was polling before Bernie Sanders won. I'm going to repeat that. Reparations right now is polling at the same exact number that Medicare for All was polling at before Bernie Sanders ran. If we had a Bernie Sanders that was doing all these things, right, saying all these things, healthcare for all, we're going to turn these post offices into banks, like some of these amazingly beautiful policies, Medicare for all, right, peace in the Middle East and peace across the world, right? If he had been audacious enough, and also there's something that my podcast made on Clickbaity Political Thirst Trap says a lot. Mayor Mondale Robinson, he typically says that Bernie's message was really adapted Jesse Jackson message from 88 and 84. People don't understand that. So Bernie didn't just create that message. That was Jesse Jackson's message. But the one thing that Bernie forgot to mention was reparations for Black people, which was in Jesse Jackson's platform, right? Now, if Bernie, and we created the HBCU tour for him, right? So I invented the HBCU tour. I literally said, Bernie, we're going to get you across Black campuses because these old white people, these old Black people, they ain't feeling you like that. So maybe we can gain momentum with the younger Black folks who are new voters who want to hear something. And he didn't necessarily adopt that platform of supporting reparations. All I'm going to say is the same way that he popularized free college, the same way he popularized like the living wage conversation, the same way he popularized Medicare for all. If he had mentioned reparations, it would have been polling up there high right now itself. It was a keen opportunity for Bernie to use his leftist platform and normalize the conversation around reparations. Listen, me and Bernie got into arguments. I got into arguments with so many people. That's why I wasn't on 2020, because they all thought I was problematic because I literally was fighting like tooth and nail. And listen, I feel the same way about Latinx issues. I feel the same way about just poverty across the board, right? But it's my job to make sure that the maths. If you want to win a primary, you got to get black voters. I don't care what you think, right? I don't care where you are. If you want to win a Democratic primary, you have to win South Carolina. You have to show up well in Georgia. And imagine the corner that he would have put Hillary Clinton in. Imagine the corner he would have put Joe Biden in 2020. Imagine the corner he would have put them in with black voters if he's out here with his platform screaming reparations when the other, like Hillary Clinton couldn't say anything about a what?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally hear you. I'm just nodding my head because these are all things that a lot of us were saying, like that weren't a part of the campaign, but these are things that we were trying to make very clear during that point in time. I used to live in South Carolina. I graduated from the University of South Carolina. And I said, even in 2020, I said, he just won Nevada, he won New Hampshire. He's going to lose in South Carolina because I know how the electorate is there. It's one of the oldest electorates. A lot of black people just really not, like I said, they're not feeling, him that way. But one of the things that was interesting, and Brianna Joy Gray just wrote an article recently in Current Affairs, and she was talking about what happened to her after, the Bernie campaign ended in 2020. She was told by several commentators and other DC alike that she would never get a job in DC again, that she would never work in that town again, because not just because she worked with Bernie's campaign, but also because she would not support Joe Biden, like afterwards, when she was asked about that. So they made it very clear to her that her career will be done. However, Symone Sanders, who was a part of the Bernie 2016 campaign, had no problem getting another job. In fact, she went on to work for the Biden campaign. How do you feel about that?
Man, Symone sold us out. It is what it is, right? Like, you don't go from being a spokesperson for the most progressive presidential candidate in recent history to working for the most establishment person without having given something up. I don't care. I don't care what anyone says, and everybody's afraid to say it, right? Because Symone has power now. I don't, because Symone already tried. Symone was a part of the group that tried to cancel me in the first place, right? It's an interesting thought process because you can't stop me. If you're looking at me and you're watching me right now, you can't stop me. Anyway, I'm sorry. It's an interesting thought process how black folks who work for Bernie, we're still all kind of proud of Bernie, but it's also like, damn, Bernie, why won't you help us out? Why won't you protect us, right? Like, why won't you go out of your way? Because there's so many stories. I mean, I'm talking about so many stories of the black folks who worked for the Bernie Sanders campaign being ostracized by the establishment Democrats because how dare you go against our person that's going to lose eventually? And then there's also the conversation about, well, when the Art Revolution start and when the other organizations start and when you need a job and when you need this, that, and the other, like you are getting blackballed from like two different separate ends. Listen, I had somebody tell me that I not only was on the Democratic, because the DNC had a list of contractors that you are not allowed to work with. If you were, I was on that list, right? I was probably top of the list. But then I also have the people who I work with on the Bernie campaign. Not all of them. There's some people I love to this day, white, black, green, Haitian, whatever, right? Like there's so many people that I love to this day that I still work with, and I'm still employed, right? I'm more successful now than I was then. But when it comes down to it, I was told, hey, you know what? There's some people that want to make sure that you never work in this town again. So Brianna's she's not the only one that it got hit with. I have a lot of mentees and people who worked for me in 2016 that had a hard time just getting local jobs in politics and also just opportunities. And why does this happen? Well, it happens because black folks who speak the truth on the left are the realest of all of them. And I don't mean that by saying I'm harder or I'm better. What I mean by that is you're working for Bernie Sanders. That means you are working for somebody who wants to fundamentally see an economic change in America for the normal person. And then you're coming from that from a black aspect. It takes it another level.
And that brings us forward to what is happening right now. And I wanted to bring up the history because obviously a lot of people are upset with Chuck Schumer and the other 9 Democrats that voted to support the GOP funding bill, right? Now, even Charlemagne the God is saying that Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries should step down. So it's interesting. That's coming from him. That's one of the statements there. But you mentioned something on Twitter. You were talking about what people need to understand about Chuck Schumer, like just how powerful he is. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Listen, guys, people who are watching this show, it's more than just the Senate. It's more than just the U.S. Senate. It's more than just Congress. Wealthy donors who give millions, if not billions of dollars to the Democratic Party have key people that they ask for advice when it comes down to funding candidates and funding issues across America. And Chuck Schumer is right up there in the top 3 in America when it comes down to what Chuck says goes. So when you wonder why you have a primary, let's say we have a primary and it's me, it's Sabrina, the progressive, and Marcus, the neoliberal, want everything the same as dude, right? And I say, hey, you know what? I want to make sure that we have sensible issues and make sure that we just keep the status quo. And Sabrina says, nah, man, I want to go to DC and I want to fight for Medicare for all. Chuck Schumer is going to get wind of this, and Chuck Schumer is going to cut me the check that ends Sabrina and her campaign by me being able to outspend her, put more commercials on, and hire more people to knock on doors with my lame ass message. Chuck Schumer, he gets to pick and choose where a lot of money goes. So think about that. With the mentality of Chuck Schumer conceding to Democrats, and I mean these guys are softer than a wet paper bag, man. They're lame, and we have to get to a place where like they need to get replaced. Sabrina, on my channel, what I do is I like Marcus Ferrell Live. Go there. Go over to that channel when you get a chance and watch. I made a video called How to Run for Office with No Money. Right? I want more normal people to run, because like you might not start off being able to run for Senate, but Chuck Schumer is a guy that dictates where the funding goes. So when you have a favorite candidate in your local congressional district and all of a sudden you wonder why AIPAC and the DSCC has decided to give the person that nobody likes $17 million, it's because Chuck Schumer said yes.
Whoa, wait. So you're saying that because people need to hear this. People need to hear, and the reason why I say that because Working Families Party endorsed Chuck Schumer. So, but you're saying that Chuck Schumer. So even if we think back to like, let's say Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman, for example, do you think Chuck Schumer could have had a hand in that?
I think somebody asked them a question. I think if you go to AIPAC tracker and you see how much money he's gotten, then if you don't think that the top Democrat in the Senate didn't have something to do with demise of 2 established progressive black politicians, you're out of your mind. Absolutely, Chuck has something to do with it. And listen, I also want to say this right here. There has been a broken clock can be right twice a day. Chuck has done some good votes trying to fight against the Trump administration. But the most important, powerful vote to abstain from voting for that doggone budget, he just conceded with the bad guy. What's the point of having an opposition party? So if this is the mentality, what I'm trying to get across through that tweet, if this is the mentality of our top Democrats, then what is the point of being a Democrat? What is the point of being a part of this organization? What is the point of being a part of an organization that not only concedes to Trump, but has talks about Rahm Emanuel running for office as president? What kind of thought process are we dealing with? Listen, I can't rock with it. And I'm going to tell you like this right here. Like, if Chuck Schumer, if these guys stay in, I'm out. And I'm taking a whole bunch of people with me.
Well, I want to show people this picture because this is years ago. This isn't recent, But this is a good point. People need to look at this picture. It's Chuck Schumer and Donald Trump, right? I'm showing you this picture for a reason. People need to understand that before Donald Trump was president, Donald Trump and Chuck Schumer had a relationship. I don't think people realize this. Like, they're both like old school New York dudes. And remember, guys, before Donald Trump was, running through the Republican Party, he actually used to donate to Democrats. A lot of people don't know this. So I'm pretty sure he made some donations Chuck's way too. So this is why I continue to say it's one big corporate party. But I see a lot of pushback coming now that I wish was a lot louder when Biden was in office. And I'm looking at like what happened in the Senate. I warned people about John Fetterman when he was running for Congress. I said, guys, this guy is not a progressive. He's already agreed to back Israel. He already said these things. Look at where he stands on the policies. I warned people about John Fetterman chasing down the guy with a gun, but pointing a gun to his chest. I told people all these things back then. But when you say those things at that time, people are like, oh, you're just a right winger or da-da-da. I'm like, no, I'm trying to warn you. This guy is not who you think he is. Why do you think he was endorsed by Hillary Clinton? So all of these things are finally, like, I feel like being revealed. But do you think it's enough to, if people say, they are saying, Chuck Schumer, you need to step down. People are also saying this about Hakeem Jeffries. And I did like a whole expose about Hakeem Jeffries and how he got that seat when it's actually Charles Barron who should have been in that seat. Like, all these people just basically sold their soul to AIPAC and to other like corporate interests. And that's how they continue to get the spot. Do you feel that if Chuck Schumer does not resign, that the Democratic Party is done?
I think the Democratic Party is done already. So, but to maintain status quo with the Chuck Schumers of the world, listen, Sabrina, look, these people are actually at a place right now where they fundamentally think that more of the same and more leaning to the right is going to advance the American people and advance gains within the Democratic Party to actually take power back. And to be quite honest with you, even if they took power back, what would it matter? Because y'all had power before and y'all do absolutely nothing with it. Look, I live in Atlanta, Georgia. Actually, a little town called Hateville, right? Black city. Love my town. Atlanta's amazing. Atlanta, baby, you don't owe me nothing in Atlanta. I love you so much. When you go to a barbershop, when you go to the corner store, when you're smoking your ale on the corner with your homeboys, when you're going to church, right? When you're at the basketball. Listen, when you mention the word Democratic Party, and I'm talking about to people who are 45 and younger, 50 and younger at this point, and you mention the Democratic Party, they look at you sideways like, yeah, and what? They have issues. They have issues that they care about. And the Democratic Party is so focused on how to be corporate elite without all of the Nazis. That's the only difference, is the less amount of Nazis. But if you kind of supporting Israel and what they're doing to Palestine, I ain't gonna go there, but I don't know. So what I'm saying is it's not, to answer your question. No, we need a fundamental change from the bottom down, right? And I implore people who are watching this as just stewards and trying to get amazing information from Sabrina, right? Like, if you're watching this, then you know what you need to be doing on Wednesday. You need to find out when the next local Democratic Party meeting is and go in that piece. They're boring as hell and a bunch of like lame people talking about the next thing, and bring your own issues up. Because that's the Democratic Party got to die in order for it to be reborn. It has to die.
My big thing to people is, so a lot of things have been said there. I have been advocating for quite some time for people to build something new, right? I understand, and I'll say this, I understand, a number of people have told me this, that the Green Party may not be their cup of tea, right? But it is the third party that has reparations a part of the platform and the agenda, and has had it for years. So I see, when I looked at that Bernie platform, I see that over at the Green Party and then some, because they also have reparations as well. Jill Stein also had Cancer Alley as a part of her platform, which Kamala Harris wasn't talking about. Like, they're not even talking about what's happening to Black people in this country when we talk about healthcare, when we talk about environmental like racism that people are dealing with. They're not even wanting to touch like those issues. A lot of the pushback I received is, well, the third parties aren't viable. But I think the case that me and Bree have been trying to make is that we should be building these things up now. We should be trying to, like Butch Ware, for example, is running for governor of California. And as much as people say that Greens don't run other elections or they're nowhere to be found, I've interviewed Green Party mayors on this show, right? So they are running in these races. They just don't get the attention from corporate media or independent media, to be honest with you. So I feel like we spent so much time like trying to reform the Democratic Party that we should be investing in third parties and even outside of politics, mutual aid organizations, that type of stuff. So that's one of the things I do is also mutual aid. So I noticed after the election, I'm sure you noticed this too, there were a lot of people that were upset right after Kamala lost, even though I knew she was going to lose. But a lot of people were upset or hurt, and then people just kind of like sink back down, right? But that's because they have nothing else to go back to. Because if you're only putting your energy into the presidential election, and you're not, what are you doing the other years? There isn't a
Right.
presidential election. So I've been trying to get people to get involved with like third party organizing or get involved with organizing period in your community or mutual aid. So I'm curious to hear your perspective about that because I think you did vote third party, correct?
I did, and I'm still a Democrat. You know why? Because I vote my issues. It's amazing that Black people can't vote their issues. And like we have to vote the way that people tell us to vote, not our issues. I voted my issues, right? So I want police reform and I want reparations. I'm not gonna say who I voted for, but I'm just gonna say like I'm a registered Democrat. I still am. Listen, everywhere is not like San Francisco, man. You could be a progressive in San Francisco and then be considered the far right. That's the most amazing city in the world, right? But then on another token, right? Listen, it's interesting, and part of an organization, and our biggest argument right now is how do we affect change for working class folks and poor people in poverty. I'm going to say that word, poverty. You know why? Because it wasn't said during the presidential election at all. Poverty. There's poor people in America. America needs a living wage. At this point, it used to be $15 an hour. Now we need $20 an hour. We've gone way beyond the $15 an hour conversation in general. So to me, it's the big unknown, Sabrina. That's how I'm going to respond to the third party versus reforming the Democratic Party. Here's why. There are places in the South. There are places in Arizona. There are places where you have some of the most progressive Democrats that will fight tooth and nail, have introduced reparations bills, have introduced living wage bills, right? And the only way that they got there is because their district voted them in as a progressive Democrat, right? Then you have the conversation, well, there's so much pushback against these people that why would they stay in that party? Why would they go through all that when you know at the end of the day, the Democratic Party as it is right now is more concerned about corporate interests than the interests of people. Then there's a viability conversation about the Green Party and other parties across where they have this perfect platform. Well, perfect to some people. You might have some problems with some of the things they say, but pretty much a much more left-leaning progressive platform that would help a lot of people. But then it's like the numbers aren't there, right? We don't believe you. You need more people, as Jay-Z said. And so there has to be a conversation. And I mean, listen, I worked for Bernie in 2016. I'm very close with Dr. Cornel West. I'm very close with him. He's a mentor of mine. And I met Jill Stein at the Green Party convention in 2016 also, right? So I love what the people are saying. My thing is just like this. And I say the same thing about electoral politics when it comes down to reparations, right? Like people need to understand certain things. The civics of it has to match and make sense. If I can be shown a plan that there can be a primary in a certain state where the Green Party shows up to get 50 plus 1% of a vote so they can actually win a primary, then Green Party is the way to go. If I can see a plan where the Democratic Party is actually reformed so they won't be F-boys and trash bombs and pretty much just cap-ass, bullshit-ass, whatever they are. I'm sorry for cussing on the channel, but they suck, man. Like, and I am one, right? Then that's the math that gets along with that. So I'm stuck in between, right? Because I know too many Democrats that think like me, right? That are like, all this crap sucks. We need to reform it. And also, I'm not going to go over to the Green Party because I don't think they can win. And then there's people who are like, hey, you know what? Green Party is where it's at because at least they listen to me. At least I can be a delegate. At least we're not bought out by corporate interests. And at least AIPAC is not on every single candidate's list. So the jury's out for me right now. Right now I am doing the Reform the Democratic Party thing, but trust and believe. I understand and see. I see you, Green Party. I do. I see y'all.
Yes, it's interesting, and it's nice to be able to have like this conversation because I think that on this show, like this isn't an echo chamber. So we bring on people with different ideas, different, strategies, that type of thing to see where people are at. And so people can hear like different perspectives because right now, people are asking AOC to, I guess, run against Chuck Schumer, like for his seat. And I would imagine that he would have the money to prevent that from happening.
Oh yeah, Chuck Schumer is going to back up the AIPAC Brinks truck. It's going to be about 70 of them that back up in front of AOC's apartment. And them little shoes that she used to knock on all them doors that had the holes in them, she's going to have to multiply herself times 8. Look, the problem is there's only but so much that money can do. I'm in electoral politics. I used to be Stacey Abrams' deputy campaign manager. I got the first black mayor elected to the state to the city of Jacksonville. I ran a reparations candidate, and we actually put out a mailer. I'm so proud of myself. We put out a mailer. He was independent out of Andre Sanford. He's independent out of California. Ran against Mia Bonta in California. And we put out a mailer that said the word reparations on it. It was so beautiful, right? The electoral science to me is very important. And there's only one thing that people don't understand. There's only but so much money that a candidate can spend. I know that sounds crazy, but just follow what I'm saying to you. Because there's only a certain amount of points that you can put up on television, right? And after a little while, if AOC's ground game, it's always going to come back to the doors. I hate to be like this, but it will. Because if the ground game, they can buy up all the television ads they want to. And then, just like if you lived in anywhere in America and you turn on your television in early November, late October, all you saw was presidential commercials, back to back to back to back to back. Didn't move anyone anywhere. Didn't change anybody's perspective. But they just spent billions of dollars on this. So my thought process is, I think that AOC's message. So let me say this: Chuck's gonna spend a lot of money, but we're at a time right now where people want something different. They want change, and I don't mean Obama hoping change. I mean actual tangible change. So.
But I think that more people want change, or maybe not more, but I think a lot of people also want change outside of the two-party system. And that's what I've been seeing. I do want to show you these numbers that just came through from CNN. I thought this was pretty interesting. We'll go ahead and bring this in. There are new poll numbers here for the Democratic Party approval rating. And now they're saying it's at an all-time low.
Good morning. Welcome Inside Politics Sunday. I'm Manuraj. First up this morning, a brand new exclusive CNN poll that paints a brutal reality for Democrats as they struggle to mount a unified opposition to President Trump. Americans' favorable views of the Democratic Party's brand are at a record low, just 29%. That's compared to 36% for Republicans. It is the lowest ever recorded for Democrats in CNN polling going back more than 30 years. As you can see.
Now, do you think that this is because, again, like 29, like that's the lowest ever, they said. Do you think this is because of the Dem leadership? People are unhappy with, because Democrats are not in power right now. Republicans are in power. Do you think it's because people are unhappy with Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries? Or do you think they just feel like the Democratic Party isn't fighting at all?
Sabrina, listen, 15% of black men in Texas voted for Trump. 15%. That's a lot. That's a lot, right? Here's how I feel about this conversation. Black people made the Democratic Party cool. And now black people are starting to think the Democratic Party is lame. Right? Like, so just check this out. Nobody, like, if you like hip hop, if you have any rap song memorized, any rap song anywhere, if you like any like R&B artist, I think you understand that like our culture, African American culture, actually created a lot of things that America follows, right? Except for politics, but I think that that's starting to reach across the board too. So what I'm getting at is, I'm not even going to go into the stats of it. It's absolutely leadership, and it's absolutely lame. And then Trump is doing an amazing job at this one thing and one thing alone. He's showing that, oh yeah, I could be the president and actually do shit, right? So like he's mastering the art form of Democrats are lame, and here's why they're lame: because y'all could have done anything you wanted to, but you were too busy trying to strike a balance between corporate interests. Too busy trying to strike a balance between throwing a fish fry corporate interest and keeping people from looking behind the veil and actually seeing that, oh, Jim Clyburn ain't doing nothing for his po-ass district, right? It's lame. If I was born when Jim Clyburn first took that office, I'm old enough to vote right now. If I'm old enough to vote right now, and I know that when Jim Clyburn came into office, we were in poverty. And now that I can vote, we're still in poverty, right? That means that him as a leader is lame. That means the party is lame. But the thing about it is, we know it's lame. This is I'm not even pushing back. My thing is, okay, so there's a certain amount of people who vote for Democrats who just vote for the D, and they're like blind. They're just blind, right? They don't know no better. They could care less. But that generation is dying off. That generation that blindly supports Democrats and tries to make it a binary conversation is going dead. To answer your question, it's not the people of the Democratic Party. It's the leadership of the Democratic Party. It's when Southern states, if you are a Democratic Party in the South, and you know that your constituency that votes for you the most is filled with the descendants of chattel slavery in America, enslavement in America, and your platform doesn't say reparations, then that means that you are lame. I have no problem calling the Democratic Party lame anymore. They elevate the worst people. Like, let me tell you something. The people that they give power to in the Democratic Party are literal succubuses. You ever watch Rick and Morty? What's the dad's name? The dad is Jerry. They're all Jerrys. The Democratic Party is all Jerrys, soft as hell and mumbling and shit like that. I'm sorry.
No, I totally hear where you're coming from, but it's interesting because now people are on social media and they're saying that there needs to be a left Tea Party, and I'm like, but there was a left Tea Party. It was called Justice Democrats, and part of the reason why some people like myself were more, I guess, like harder on the Justice Democrats is because they weren't pushing back against Dem leadership, and that was the assignment. The assignment was to have a hostile takeover of the Democratic Party. We knew that if they did not effectively push back on Dem leadership, that Nancy Pelosi, Hakeem Jeffries, and Chuck Schumer would run right over them, and the party would move even more to the right. That's what we're seeing now. So now people are really upset when they're like, well, Chuck Schumer voted along with Donald Trump, and so did all these 9 other Democrats. But that's what you guys never pushed back. Now they don't have a narrow majority. Back then they had a narrow majority to actually make some type of change on legislation or force a vote on Medicare for all or anything. Doesn't have to be Medicare for all. Could have been any progressive policy. And they decided not to do that. Well, now that narrow majority that they had is gone. And now the party is just going along with, you can't sit here and tell people, Chuck Schumer, you can't sit here and tell people Donald Trump is Hitler. Then why are you voting with Hitler?
Well, because he doesn't believe that. It's blatantly obvious that when you are a multimillionaire that happens to be an elected official and you vote the way that you vote, you are not going to instantaneously feel the impact of it. Listen, this is a money game, Sabrina. You know that. This is all a money game. You talk about the Justice Democrats, who I love dearly. You talk about anything on the left. You got to think about who people on the left are and how come we can't build sustainable fights against folks. You know why? They have us so poor that it's easy for establishment Democrats to buy off some of the most wonderfully progressive people in the world. They'll get elevated, they'll get quieted, they'll get silenced, and most importantly, the organizations and the money that comes from it. We haven't rebuilt another Bernie self-sustaining million people donation network like Bernie had when he ran for office. That is not there anymore. Therefore, people need to sustain themselves and be able to pay their bills. And the people who are making decisions aren't worried about the price of eggs, right? The people who are making decisions aren't worried about that their kid could get sent off to a war. They're not worried about the ramifications of police violence, right? And they're definitely not worried about losing African American AP studies in schools across the nation. They're not worried about that stuff because their kids are not they're not in the same place. Chuck Schumer is a millionaire. Chuck Schumer already was playing golf with Trump before Trump even thought about running for president. This is a big game and we're not in it. So yes, some of these people need to get primary. You know who needs to primary these people? And I don't give a damn if you run as an independent Green Party or a Republican if you're a progressive. I don't care what you run as. You got to run against people no matter how you feel about it. Just run. We need more people running for office. I don't give a damn what party they're in. Present your platform, because the AOCs of the world, somebody's going to need to replace AOC, and you got to know for certain that APEC is going to be after that seat if AOC wins. Like, there's a Florida governor's race right now that's going on, right? Byron Donalds' sellout ass is thinking about running for governor, and he might be the first black governor of Florida. I need more Dan Osborns of the world out of Nebraska, who was an independent and literally tried to take on the Republican establishment and almost won while being a free-thinking, progressive-thinking person. There's a lot of opportunities for us out here, but good people need to run so we can take these F-boys and soft Jerrys out of office.
Well, speaking of running, someone did. This is Jose Vega. I'm not sure you're familiar with him. He ran against Richie Torres because Richie Torres is another one that sold out, very problematic. Said he was a progressive, lied, of course. And he ran against him as an independent. I want you to hear what he said to Bree on Bad Faith. He had confronted Jamal Bowman at a town hall. And this is another thing. Some of the progressives don't like this. They don't like when they're approached or confronted at town halls or whatever. But I want you to hear what he said he did before that confrontation took place and why he confronted him the way that he did. Listen to this.
I do think it's important because when he just paints me as adversarial left, he needs to understand I tried to reach him through all the proper channels. I got a meeting with his senior science policy advisor. And in that call, which I posted a segment of on my X, I told him, I understand that I don't know the inner workings of Congress the way you do. I don't know how policies get passed internally. I know there was a big fight around Medicare for all, but I'm willing to work with your office and go to various schools in your district in the Bronx to get other students to advocate for this program. And his senior advisor just kind of like nodded his head and was like, yeah, no, Bowman is with you all the way. He's been talking about making the Bronx like Wakanda, is what he said verbatim. I and so I was like, great, like, all right, so when do we follow up? Like, maybe I can set up some school visits. I can call. He's like, no, we'll call you. And like weeks and months after follow up, like nothing, And so I really started to understand sort of the frustration that people were having as activists trying to go through the proper channels. But then this war in Ukraine breaks out. That's really kind of like pushed me to be like, okay, like these guys are completely ineffective when it comes to domestic policy and trying to make the Bronx a better place. Now he's at the point where he's funding neo-Nazis in Ukraine. This is very well documented. And he's hosting this town hall. And so I'm going to this town hall where he's doing it with Hakeem Jeffries. Now we're starting to get into what he's referencing. With Bowman, I wasn't trying to disrupt. I go to Bowman's event and they tell me, hi, if you have a question, you have to write it on this card and put it in a fishbowl. So I sit through this boring talk between him and Hakeem Jeffries. And this is just before Nancy Pelosi steps down as Speaker of the House. And they were talking about, both of them were talking about how, oh, this is going to be our next Speaker of the House. Bowman was saying, Hakeem Jeffries is going to be the next Speaker of House, yada, yada, yada. Here's all the things we're going to do. Oh, it seems like Mr. Jeffries has to go, so we're going to wrap this event up, but I just want to let people know we can do more on this. And then that's when I'm like, okay, fuck this.
You basically decided to interject when it became clear that they weren't going to answer questions. And this was the only way you were going to get heard.
Exactly. That's right.
So I bring this up because this is a part of the reason why a lot of people stayed home, Marcus. Where a lot of people, even some of the people that told me they were going to vote green, stayed home. Like a lot of people just stayed home because there was a time when a lot of these politicians that ran through Justice Democrats, they were very much involved. They were on independent media. I remember seeing all these people before I even had this show. Once they got elected, they totally just turned out. Like they were less interested in independent media, but also they were, I think, like less interested in being held accountable, right? So when we send someone to office that's the Justice Democrats, and we know that platform says you are not supposed to support Israel, that you're supposed to back BDS, that you're not supposed to entertain any trips to Israel. Yeah, Jamal Bowman, we're gonna have words for you. Like, yeah, AOC, when you do a webinar, conflate anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism, yes, we're going to have words for you. And what indeed happened is after reaching out to their offices, which a lot of people did first, and getting no response, or they'll get back to you or whatever, then came the outbursts, like at the town halls, et cetera, right? They were nowhere to be found, Marcus. We had marches in this country for Medicare for All in over 50 cities. This was about 3 years ago. All of their offices were contacted. The only person who appeared was Cori Bush. So even if they couldn't make it, they could have at least like tweeted it or shared that information. Nothing. They ran on it. They ran on Medicare for All. And what it does is it makes people more angry and more frustrated. And then we're told, well, just support the establishment Democrats, right? Like the same people who said don't support politicians that take billionaire money told you to vote for Kamala Harris. And Kamala Harris still wouldn't even, I guess, admit to, I'm not going to give weapons to Israel. No, she said she would continue to give them weapons. And so it's just, there's a lot of like finger pointing because Kamala lost, but also because the Democrats lost the House and the Senate and all these things. But at the end of the day, for years, I feel like we tried to warn, we tried to do it through the right way, through the proper channels. But it's very clear that money is controlling all of it.
Listen, the Harris campaign lost because they ran a terrible campaign. If the vice president had ran the platform that she came out with when she ran for president herself, she would have stood. I mean, she's talking about a living wage. She was talking about Medicare for all. Y'all forget that. Kamala Harris. Like, we forget that one because she wanted to maintain the status quo. Cori Bush always got me excited as a human being, only because like that lady is exactly what she says she is. So let's use her as a shining light on this conversation, right? There's not many Corys Cori Bush's in local politics. It was a blessing to have her as sort of the beacon for what a progressive person could look like. And the fact that she was a Black woman actually sort of elevated that for me even more, because she walked it like she talked it, and she did show up for things. And she did. The thing about it is, you can't be scared. When you get to DC, I think Jamal might have been a little scared. I think a lot of these politicians get scared because they know that I want to represent my district for a long time, or I want to be able to win my re-election. Therefore, I don't want to piss off AIPAC. I don't want to piss off this donor group. I don't want to piss off that donor group. And if you Black, you got to know that they're against you anyway, unless you're doing exactly what they say, right? So, yeah, there's a problem with integrity when you get up there. Am I saying Brother Jamal doesn't have any integrity? He showed a lot more integrity than 90% of the Democratic Party, but there was also aspects of him not being, not being able to get scared. And guess what? He was right. AIPAC came in there and took his ass out, just like they did Bush. That's why we need to have fair and free elections, so we won't have publicly funded elections, so we won't have this problem. Whereas, like, no matter what happens, may the best platform win. And we're not at that place right now, Sabrina. And I'm hoping that we can, right? I hope that we can get to a place where we take all this money out of politics, because then there's nothing left but issues and the issues of our communities, right? And also, we got to support the people that are actually doing the work, are willing to do the work. We don't support these people. And what I mean by that is, we're bombarded with emails. We're bombarded with text messages. We're bombarded with donate. Man, I ain't got no goddamn money to do. If I donate to y'all, I'm not paying mortgage or rent. I'm not going to be able to do it messing around with all these emails. Check your email box right now. I bet you somebody asked you for some damn money today, right? So we got to be a little bit smarter about our politics. And what I mean by that is, everybody has to start donating $3, $4 to a particular group of people that you know for a fact, even though we don't all know for a fact what anybody's going to do when they get to DC, but that presents the best platform and also has the track record. If you didn't donate to Cori Bush at all, right, and you know that she was a person that did everything that she possibly could, then you're kind of doing us a disservice unless you go over to her state and knock on doors for her. You either knocking on doors or you're giving that money to the right candidates.
Well, I don't know what I would say. She did everything that she could, but but yeah. I understand what you're saying. But I want to end this with 11 demands, because my producer, he has this strategy called 11 demands, and he's calling this cluing in after what just happened, of course, with the GOP Senate race, and he's calling out Hakeem Jeffries here, who was asked by a reporter, is it time for new leadership in the Senate? And Hakeem Jeffries' response was, next question. So he didn't want to answer that question, of course. But the point that I think Eric gets to here is that we need to do more than explain the current mess. We need to describe what a better world looks like. This is the core of 11 demands. And so Eric started this idea of 11 demands, and he said that these are the things that we really need to demand from the government. Fix big money in politics and the government, healthcare for all, a minimum standard of living for everyone in the wars, respond to the climate emergency, racial and criminal justice reform, which also includes reparations, by the way, when you go into the details, reject censorship, immigration reform, an election system we can trust, revamp taxation and funding, and democratize the enterprise. And I think this is a big part of the problem. We don't have demands. Like, it's just like, I really do mean, like, the left in particular, it's just like, we'll have separate ask, right? Like, there was defund the police, there was, ceasefire in Gaza, but we really didn't have a concrete set of core demands. And maybe that's part of the problem.
You're right. That, first off, that list is beautiful. Well done to your producer. Look, the left, and I'm not talking about the Democratic Party, and I'm also not talking about neoliberals, because they're not the left, right? The left should be winning a lot more than they're winning right now. You know why? Because there's more poor people and middle class people than there are Republicans and conservatives. There's more poor people in America than there are rich people in America. That's the basics of why we should be winning more elections, whether you're an independent, Green Party, or a Democrat. That's the reason why we should win more elections. But we don't tap into it. The Harris campaign did not tap into poverty. If I don't hear you saying, hey, you know what? Why are you afraid to raise the minimum wage, Vice President Harris? Why are you afraid to say that basic premise when you go to and have a rally in Atlanta, Georgia, and you much rather have somebody twerking on stage than you are standing up in front of people and just saying, yo, we need $20. You need $23.15 to have a 1-bedroom apartment in Atlanta, Georgia right now. That's what you need, no matter what. $23 an hour, right? That's Atlanta. If you live in San Francisco, you need to be making 50. If you live, and they're not addressing the basics of, at this point, it should be a federal law that we have a mandatory wages that fit the cost of living in our towns. But they don't talk about it, right? So the next generation of people who run from this point on, from 2026 and any special election up to 2026, if they're not talking, I'm not feeling you if you're not talking about a living wage. I'm not feeling you if you're not talking about reparations. I'm not feeling you if you're not talking about doing something about the issue that's going on in Palestine, where innocent babies are getting killed on a daily basis, and we get criticized and called anti-Semitic if you just bring up the fact that kids are dying. That's just my thought process.
All right, Marcus. Marcus, thank you so much for your time. Please let everybody know where they can find you.
Yeah, I am Marcus for America on Instagram. I am Marcus Ferrell live on YouTube. Please go check me out. I have a bunch of crazy stuff over there. I'm about to do a lot more crazy stuff. And also, I am 1/3 of the powerful clickbaity political thirst trap, along with Benjamin Dixon and Mondale Robinson. You can catch us every Tuesday night at 8 o'clock. Clickbaity Political Thirst Trap on YouTube and on the Ben Dixon channel. And listen, everybody who watches this show, y'all are righteous people, man. This woman is amazing. Sabrina, I am sorry that it took me so long to actually show up. But anytime you want me, you got me, sis.
Awesome, Marcus. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.